American supermodel Isabella Hadid has the most symmetrical face among all Western show business stars. This conclusion was reached by British plastic surgeon Julian de Silva. He took a photo of Isabella Hadid and measured the distance between her eyes, assessed the size of her lips, nose, chin, and then compared all these parameters with the golden ratio. It turned out that her face is 94% consistent with ideal proportions. Similarly, Julian de Silva analysed the appearance of other celebrities. He concluded that designer Kim Kardashian has perfect eyebrows, actress Emily Ratajkowski has the most proportional lips, supermodel Kate Moss has a simply exemplary forehead, and movie star Scarlett Johansson has the most expressive eyes. But what is the golden ratio? And why has it become a measure of beauty? According to historians, the ancient Egyptians were already aware of this standard proportion. The absolutely harmonious Egyptian pyramids in terms of form serve as confirmation of this. The rule of the golden ratio was also used by ancient architects. In general, speaking of people from ancient civilizations, the ancient Egyptians who created beauty, and not only human beauty but also architectural beauty, it is appropriate to refer to one interesting definition that beauty is a kind of opposite of chaos, a kind of orderliness, but which has no practical meaning. That is, when someone orders something, brings it into a certain harmony. But this is done not for practical purposes, not for survival, but let's say simply because people like it that way. According to the rule of the golden ratio, the larger part of the whole should relate to the smaller part in the same way that the whole relates to the larger part. The visual embodiment of ideal proportions is a spiral. Based on this geometric shape, the best artists of the Renaissance built the compositions of their paintings. The rule of the golden ratio also works in relation to standards of human beauty. But the main paradox is that there is no absolute ideal of appearance. In a person's appearance, such a golden ratio, if we are talking about a specific face, can be completely different. It can be round and wide, the lips can be full, the nose large. And it seems you want to ask, if there is such a principle of beauty standards, does that mean there is some kind of ideal nose, some kind of ideal eye size, lips, and so on? Well, there is no such standard. Throughout history, people have had different ideas about the ideal appearance. Queen Nefertiti was considered the epitome of female beauty in ancient Egypt, and movie actress Marilyn Monroe became a sex symbol of Hollywood in the mid-20th century. They are absolutely not similar to each other, but both are still considered irresistible in the commonly accepted sense. The universal secret of beauty lies in the correct proportions of the face. This is the essence of what we perceive. First of all, symmetry, because it is inherent in the golden ratio, and symmetry partly speaks to the fact that our muscles develop correctly and evenly, and symmetrical faces seem subconsciously more beautiful to us. The symbol of ideal body proportions is Leonardo da Vinci's drawing, which went down in history under the name Vitruvian Man. In 1492, the outstanding artist of the Renaissance depicted a figure that became the embodiment of the formula for the standard appearance, which was derived by the ancient Roman architect and engineer Marcus Vitruvius Pollio in the 1st century BC. The ancient scholar's idea is that the height of the ideal person should equal the span of their arms and be 10 times the distance from the hairline to the chin. Leonardo da Vinci created the ideal human schema, and this schema is probably his second most popular painting after The Last Supper. Although in fact, he never exhibited it anywhere, and it was simply found in his notebooks. However, in the 20th century, the search for perfect proportions of human appearance led to truly horrific consequences. Don't forget to measure your nose, because it's the only way to know if you are racially pure. With such a cover, in May 1933, an underground communist magazine was published, whose editorial staff fled from Germany with the rise to power of Adolf Hitler. And a month later, the same photograph, only in a mirrored image, appeared on the front page of a Nazi propaganda publication under the headline, "Who is an Aryan?" The pseudoscientific theory of the superiority of the so-called Aryan race became the basis of the ideology of the Third Reich. The scientific direction of racial studies was considered quite legal, and no one condemned it throughout the entire 19th century. And not only German, but also British scientists, and in general scientists from all over Europe, quite studied human races and repeatedly proved, perhaps not entirely convincingly from our point of view, that representatives of other races, let's say, are not sufficiently developed and do not reach the level of intelligence and comprehensive development of Europeans. The ideologists of Nazi Germany went even further. They claimed that only Aryans, that is, representatives of Germanic and Scandinavian peoples, represent the highest degree of human development. They were called the master race. All other ethnic groups had to either submit to the Aryans or were subject to total extermination, like, for example, Jews or Gypsies. The most terrible thing is that in the first half of the 20th century, similar views were shared in many countries of Europe. In this regard, Nazi Germany should not, of course, be singled out as something extraordinary. It's just that in Germany, this took on such, let's say, monstrous forms that after that, the whole world recoiled from such practices, and addressing this topic became politically incorrect. The symbol of the monstrous racial policy of the Third Reich became that very photograph of a man whose nose is being measured with calipers. The most interesting thing is that originally this photograph had nothing to do with the Nazis. It was taken before Hitler came to power. In August 1929, a group of anatomists from Kiel University arrived in the province of Schleswig-Holstein in the north of the country. The purpose of the expedition was to collect data for a scientific work on the anthropometric characteristics of the inhabitants of the Danish-German border area. For this, scientists measured height, facial parameters, and body composition of local farmers. Of course, with their consent. When we look at measurements of the nose, hands, feet, shoe size. Yes, thanks to such research, we know today that ancient people were shorter than us, that they had more developed, perhaps, hands, because they engaged in manual labour, and so on. The famous photograph with the nose measurement first appeared on the pages of a German scientific almanac in October 1932. But the photograph acquired a political hue a year later, when a communist magazine decided to illustrate an article about the inhuman racial policy of the Nazis with it. Subsequently, this photo travelled all over the world. It was published in newspapers and displayed at exhibitions dedicated to the horrors of World War II. Only the name of the Schleswig farmer, who inadvertently became a symbol of racial segregation in the Third Reich, remains a mystery.